Good morning and welcome to OSW Daily, where each day we talk about the trending work-related topics with industry experts and thought leaders. If this is your first time coming across the channel, welcome. My name is Steve Todd. I'm Global Head of Workplace at NASDAQ, and I'm also the founder of Open Source Workplace. You can find out more about Open Source Workplace by visiting opensourceworkplace.com. So what are we going to talk about today? We have a few topics. Obviously in the US, we've had our US elections. We had yesterday announcement on vaccine news. So what impact will those things have on the real estate co-working industry? Do leaders need to take more remote working seriously? That could be debatable whether or not they do, whether they have and whether they haven't. So is the CEO, or also is being a CEO harder than ever in this environment? And how do we modernize traditional work arrangements? And who are we going to talk about this to today? Mark Gilbreath, CEO of Liquid Space. Mark is returning to the channel. I want to thank Mark for joining us. Mark, how are you doing, sir? Great to have you with us.
Hey, good morning, Nate. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, mate. Good to see you. How have you been? How is the election and vaccine news affecting you and your family at the moment?
Well, it's 6 in the morning, so I guess I can pretend I can be a little more naked with my political feelings than I might otherwise at noon or on Main Street. There were some cheers on Saturday mid morning. I was on a work call downstairs, but I heard some screams of delight upstairs, and so I think our household is breathing a bit of a sigh of relief just in terms of the clarity now on an outcome. It's good for there to be clarity. Like, uncertainty is bad for markets. Uncertainty is hard for businesses, and there seems to be a good bit less uncertainty now about what's going to happen on January 20th.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this year has been the year of uncertainty. I think that's how many people will look back at it, will think about it. And to your point, that stability, whether you vote it one way or the other, I think having that direction and allowing leadership to take advantage, or not take advantage, but point us in one specific way, everyone then knows what way the world is going to evolve, so to speak. But yeah, and then the vaccine news yesterday,
I
big
mean,
news.
um, yeah, like, which is the bigger news for mankind?
Right,
Like,
right.
they're both momentous. But certainly Pfizer's announcement of the efficacy of their vaccine at in excess of 90%, which prompted me to get a little bit of quick homework on like how big a news that is, and it is big news.
Hmm.
Statistically, that's a far better outcome, I believe, than had been hoped for by epidemiologists, and the nearness of it. The commentary that they might be in a position to start distributing vaccines as soon as the end of this month, but full stop, no later than December, is encouraging. Now, that's not a proxy for take off your mask on January 1st, but that is, again, to our earlier comments, that suggests that there's now some clarity that this will transition, and we can start to fully embrace planning for and preparing to execute in a world where we're not so constrained. So yeah, great. So yeah, the vaccine was certainly great news for mankind. And
Yeah.
I was watching a bit of Fauci last night, actually on a news channel, and he went on to say that, I'm going to mangle this, so forgive me, any epidemiologists on the call today, but the nature of the vaccine, like the protein that was used to create it, is of a type that I guess I understand bodes well for future vaccines that might be needed for future COVID type pathogens
Mm.
or viruses. So yeah, maybe karma brought us a little bit of good news yesterday.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating, and there's many people out there who have been
Hmm.
able to work from home, and I have been okay, but then there's a huge part of the community that actually has to go out, put themselves at risk each day, has to make those really tough decisions. So this is huge news, as you say, for all mankind. So it's fantastic. And then obviously related to that, we look at the stock market and we see specific stocks jumping up. We look at all the real estate companies. We look at IWG. We look at all those stocks related to the workplace and people returning to an office environment, all shooting up. We see the likes of Zoom and go
Yeah.
ahead. I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, like Nasdaq and New York Stock Exchange, like, you are these incredible barometers now into world think, and yeah. So yeah, IWG up, Zoom down 17% yesterday,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to see these sort of things, and I think what shows is confidence. And we're not going to get into debate the whether one's right, one's wrong. We're not here to debate that. But in essence, what it shows is sentiment, right? It shows
Yeah.
based on the information that's come out over the last few days, based on that certainty, well, not certainty, that less of uncertainty. I think is probably a better way to phrase it than certainty. It allows people to see a future, right? It allows people to sort of think that we can get, there is a road path, there is a way forward, and I just find it fascinating to see that being revealed.
Yeah. Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So, whenever you think about this, obviously, right, you're CEO of a co-working aggregator. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it. You can please feel free to change or alter my words to best describe what you think Liquid Space is. But in essence, whenever you think about providing real estate options to all customers, enterprise, private individuals, small companies, large companies, how do you think about this news? How do you think about your business?
Um, well, we've been talking about COVID, so let's maybe like roll back the clock. In March, when you at Nasdaq as the head of global workplace and thousands of your peers across the industry sort of got the news, right? Somewhere in late February to early March, you got the news, whether it was from a risk officer or a COO or a CEO or CNN. You got the news that shutdowns were happening, right? And you sent your employees home. And in hindsight, and I think everyone held their breath, but work from home saved the day. Right? For the vast majority of companies, work from home saved the day. People went home and we held our breath because we thought, well, culture would collapse, productivity would collapse, employees would stop working, the tech systems wouldn't hold up, but they did, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did. So work from home saved the day, but it didn't. It's not the panacea for all. However, it worked well enough, I think, to fundamentally shift workplace and real estate leadership thinking. And remarkably quickly, it
Mm-hmm.
shifted CFO thinking about how much real estate they needed to pay for. We should talk more about that. It also shifted employee thinking about what was possible. It shifted management, first line manager thinking about long held perspectives on presenteeism. A lot of that just evaporated away. So work from home saved the day, but I believe strongly, in fact, I'll declare here, work from anywhere will win the decade. And what I mean by that is with the light at the end of the tunnel now that COVID's temporary grip is going to be released sometime in the next 3 to 12 months. We're all going to be back in a world where we've got free will and the option to return back into traditional offices. I don't believe that it's going to be just a wholesale abandonment of home. I think work from anywhere will persist, and work from anywhere will be all of us having the option to work at home some of the time, working back at that long lost headquarters office some of the time, and also working in a whole plethora, a whole sort of diaspora of places in between some of the time. It's going to be all those things. And on the other side of that transformation, companies will be able to spend a little bit less on real estate. The planet will have a little less footprint. People will travel a little bit less. We'll be burning less gas. There's a myriad of benefits to it, but work from anywhere will win the decade. I'm convinced of it.
And so, as a CEO, that's sort of what the sort of lessons that you've taken over the last 6 months, call it, and sort of what you see the future. You still think that work from anywhere will be, that's the future, you believe then?
Unequivocally. I mean, I think the humanist inside of me wants that to be true, because I have observed. I've studied for 15 years, and I've observed in detail for the last 9 months the human effects, the human implications of flexibility and choice. So, as a humanist or as a workplace guy, I want that for the worker. I want that autonomy for the employee to be able
Mm-hmm.
to choose the best space for the task at hand, whether it's collaboration or individual work. I also appreciate, as a economist, I also appreciate that the cost side of the house, the CFOs, the boards, now Wall Street, are expecting substantial cost reductions associated with rationalizing traditional office footprints. There was an article in BizNow this week about the race to the bottom. Like enough companies have declared, have admitted that they've got excess portfolios and that they're going to downsize them, that you're going to see that lever pulled as well. So that rationalize, pulling the lever to rationalize your footprint, has to be complemented by additional optionality. We're not just going to say you got to work at home and nowhere else.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be and I believe that the and will be that blend of co-working spaces and other touchdown locations, plus more thoughtfully designed, next generation, and more efficiently deployed, smaller central locations, hubs, HQs.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
so there's an economic reason why it's going to happen, and there's a human interest, productivity, reason that it's going to happen as well. And those are working in concert.
Now, you also mentioned presenteeism. How do you think presenteeism has been impacted by what we're going through and what the future looks like of that?
Certainly, that was probably, we'll stick with the medical references, that was probably one of the biggest antibodies that pre-COVID had prevented more companies embracing more of that. I mean, the idea of flexibility and choice is not a radical new notion. It's been championed by workplace strategists, for a couple of decades. But it had run headlong up against management and cultural perspectives that say, Steve, I've got to see you in the office to really trust and appreciate that your work is getting done. And there was also this insidious seed that planted inside of Steve's head, the employee. Oh, I have to be seen to be valued.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be seen to be, in favor of the manager in position for the raise or for the opportunity. And those two things worked together, I think, in an unfortunate and corrupting way that forced people to aggregate in all situations for all types of work. And that's not necessarily the optimal outcome for what we really want, which is work productivity and engaged, happy, healthy employees. Like we want the most work done most efficiently from a resource standpoint, and we want human health. And so that antibody of presenteeism, I think it has largely been inoculated. I think it's largely been debunked. It will be interesting to see with vaccines now coming, how much the pendulum swings back. Like in some ways, it's been long enough, 9 months of this work from home experience for real behavior change to take place. Like, so employees are certainly accustomed to working from home, hacking, they know how to get their coffee online, they know how to behave on a Zoom call, keep their pants on, they know all the right protocols. But management sort of cultural proclivities, I think, are probably more deeply seated behaviors. I'm not convinced that the negative aspects of presenteeism as a manager's inclination have not been wrung out of the system. So I think we should brace ourselves. Management CEOs should brace themselves for a little bit of a rebound, a pendulum swing on that, and be careful that reflex doesn't just swing back in, because I think there's a substantial good in the autonomy that companies are learning to embrace in terms of their employees.
So, I mean, in your experience, right? So we've talked about the election, we've talked about the vaccine, and now we're talking about presenteeism, right? And everything that sort of leadership will be looking at, and they knew, I don't want to say they knew, in your experience, have some been waiting for that vaccine news to come out so they can make definitive plans, in your opinion? Or do you think actually some have actually said, no, the pendulum has shifted, work from anywhere is going to be the future, so therefore we're on that path? How are you seeing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say it again. I do believe that work from anywhere will win this decade. From a real estate workplace planning and execution standpoint, getting from where we were in January, which was 95% HQ based, and this small exception of working from home or remotely, to a work from anywhere world that is more economical, more sustainable, healthier for the employees, and more productive in terms of work output. It'll, like, the new ratios of where and how people work will vary company by company. We're working with a large telecommunications company for whom home's going to be 50%, and for will be 30 and HQ will be 20. Like companies will live on that spectrum from 5% to Dropbox has declared all individual work will be at home and only events and communal work will happen at their studios. So the shakeout will vary company by company, but I believe there are two fundamental kind of planning and execution tracks associated with getting from where we were to where we're going to be. One of those is the reconsideration and rationalization of the legacy portfolio. Right. So, what will we need in scale? Where will we need it in locations? When can we get out of some or all of it? Right. Mm-hmm. So that lease portfolio planning exercise is one dimension. And furthermore, where will we want to put new committed and dedicated footprints, albeit whether they're hubs or new regional HQs. If all the talent is moving to Austin or Chicago or Miami, then we got to be there, right? So there will be some new traditional placements of so the one rhythm is the traditional footprint. The other rhythm is going to be how do we facilitate the anywhere piece? How do we at scale provide on-demand space access to our employees? What are the policies around that? What's the sentiment of the employees? What does Steve need? On what days and for what tasks and with what frequency does Steve need something other than home? Either because home isn't a productive environment or because he's got colleagues that he needs to work with. So there's the on-demand piece to solve for and the traditional portfolio piece. That planning work is in full swing. Like while there's not a lot of transaction activity happening right now, that planning work on both those fronts is in full swing. And what companies are readying for first is the on-demand piece. Most companies are expecting, augmenting home and soon, right? Even though we may not be reopening headquarters until mid next year, even with a vaccine, most companies are looking at how do I augment my disadvantaged employee who's been trapped at home for 9 months? How do I give them something more than that as a first step? And I think the traditional leased portfolio is a longer term fix. Long answer, but now to the final conclusion. I think now with the vaccine threat, or rather the vaccine sort of light at the end of the tunnel, I think we'll start to see some thaw and some movement toward taking action on that traditional portfolio, whether it's lease ending and or adding new fixed pieces, but through the lens of anticipating a new right-sized portfolio. Where am I going to put my hubs? Which pieces of my traditional portfolio can I now confidently sort of step away from?
It's interesting that you start with what can you augment the employee working from home, right? That's where you start, where, managing a real estate portfolio, I look at it more from this perspective of, okay, how can I maximize my office space? How can I ensure maximum utilization of that office space? And then I work, okay, what's the design I need to do to entice people back, right? And it's probably a very traditional viewpoint, alternative to yours, but it's just interesting the different perspectives that we're looking at that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you start with the presumption of my job is to deliver a great place, a great place, and I start with the presumption that, of course, everyone will come there. And so I'm going to faithfully and diligently deliver an extraordinary workplace or places. But again, I'm starting with the presumption that people will come to that location.
And don't get me wrong,
that's because that's the expectation, right?
Trust me, I have no expectation that people are going to come back. I have to entice them back, right? I have to find out what's going to bring them back, and that's what I have to deliver, right? So those are the things that I'm really digging into because, the collaboration is really what we all want to achieve. But I just find it really fascinating that you're starting with the work from home mindset.
Yeah. Well, I think we're starting with the mindset of let's empower the employee with choice. Mm-hmm. On a given day, they will choose to come back to your thoughtfully designed, collaboration-minded environment because they know that they've got to meet with Jane and Narendra and do a jam session for the day. They know that you're gonna win that. You're gonna win that deal. Mm-hmm. You're gonna win that work event, that task. Mm-hmm. And Narendra also knows that on Fridays he needs to put his head down and compile his weekly report for a day. And he may know that the most productive place to get that done might be home or it might be a co-working space a block away that he can ride his bike to. So yeah, I think employee choice will dictate the optimal outcome. And yes, your offices are absolutely a part of the mix. They should compete. They should compete for the choices of the employees.
It's interesting how you say compete, where traditionally we would have thought that's the only place to be. Interesting choice of words. And what I will say is, like, I find it really interesting whenever I talk to people, be it within the organization, outside the organization. I have these conversations all the time, like you do as well. And it's like people absolutely feel more productive at home, but then it's why? Why do you feel more productive at home? And it's amazing when you get some of the responses. Some of it is simply I don't have to commute, therefore I have more energy when I'm working because I haven't spent all that energy on the train, on the drive, whatever that is. But then it's more of it's quiet space. We move much more to open plan offices, and therefore the noise is a drain as well. So I'm trying to find the solutions to, okay, how do I allow you to come in, but then also, or entice you to come in, but then also provide you with those sort of environments. It's going to be interesting to really see where this goes. So how do we modernize traditional work arrangements? How do we think about that?
I mean, from our vantage point, for a company that wants to navigate from circa January 2020 to a work from anywhere enterprise, right? A work from anywhere enterprise that will be more economical, it'll be more sustainable, it'll be a stronger draw to prospective employees, it will be a retention superpower for existing employees, and it will be a platform that will generate more and better work. Like, I believe all of those things. So if that's where I want to get to, I think the real estate leader and his or her colleagues in HR and IT and finance and operations, they need to consider multiple dimensions of that question. There are complexities on multiple different dimensions. The people dimension, right? And this is the starting place. You've got to start by assessing the sentiments of your employee base, whether that takes the form of a survey, whether that takes the form of town halls, whether that takes the form of observational studies. You've got to get to the source ground truth. What is the sentiment of my employees? And it will vary employee by employee, because everyone's nature, their personality, and the tasks that they're burdened with are all unique. So you've got to get a fairly fine-grained understanding of the people dimension. With that in hand, with that knowledge, knowing what tasks Steve needs to carry out and how he best works, and how frequently he needs to carry out this process. With that knowledge, you then take on the assessment of place and of price, and then ultimately kind of the process aspect. So if I know the types of work that my employee, if I understand the sentiment level deeply, and if I understand the array of space options that exist, my own headquarters, as well as the rapidly growing sort of landscape of places that can be tapped into by individuals or teams. And that's where we play. And Liquid Space is a marketplace.
Thank you.
To provide access to on-demand and dedicated space, right? We are that aggregator, that platform that can unlock everywhere between home and headquarters. So people, place, price, process. That's that. So I think if the lesson is, it's not a one-dimensional problem. It's not you need to approach it with care. And then certainly if you're going to contemplate giving new levels of autonomy to your employees, you will want to have control and oversight and analytics around that type of undertaking. You don't want to just open the doors and say, good luck on you. Workplace leaders are thoughtful, they're considerate, they're caring, they're scientific, they're analytical. So you need to have some oversight. You want to learn from this continuation of this experiment. You want to see what environments people thrive in. You want to help the more timid employees to those types of environments. You want to keep your hand on overall cost, because you can and should expect a total workplace ROI on this transition. And so you'll need a tool set that can give you that oversight and control.
I love the aspect of the employee and being the center, and really the full appreciation you just articulated on the fact that no two organizations are the same, no two locations within those organizations are the same, no businesses are the same. So therefore, it has to be a very unique option or service that needs to get provided. The other thing you mentioned is autonomy. Autonomy kind of scares leadership, though, right?
Yeah, yeah. Autonomy is a scary word. I think in some ways it's convenient. It's one word. Like, what does it mean? Well, it refers to flexibility and choice, but it's not. Autonomy is a loaded word. It makes you think automaton, makes you think robot, makes you think out of control. Flexibility and choice, I think, are the true words that
Yeah.
are a bit more aspirational, and and it's flexibility, and for an enterprise, for Nasdaq, Steve, it's flexibility and choice within a curated range of options that accommodate your economic objectives, accommodate the quality standards that you want to enforce, accommodate the health and safety oversight that is mandatory, that can't be overlooked.
Hmm.
I've talked about that before. That accommodate the hiring and locational and presence and brand objectives that you want to have. So I think flexibility and choice are a radical new measure of autonomy that employees will experience, but it'll happen within the benevolent shaping and guidance that you, as the leader of workplace, will put in place.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, and autonomy is a kind of a scary word. It does encompass an awful lot, so I appreciate the clarification. So one final thing I want to talk about actually is, you're a CEO, you're also a founder, and you've been in the, doing this for a little while, as you mentioned. But is this time been more difficult being a CEO?
I mean, certainly in some ways, yes. Um, but hopefully the thousands of other CEOs out there that might stumble on this recording will sort of smile and nod. You
I'm
know,
sure.
as a startup CEO, you're living with existential uncertainty all of the time. You know, you talk to a venture capitalist when they write a check, when they write a seed investment to a startup, their expectation is that, somewhere between 5 and 10 out of 100 are going to survive and generate a return for the fund. And 1 in 100 is going to be that 100x return. And 70 to 90% of those startups that sort of kick off aren't even going to make it. Period. Full stop. So most CEOs across a significant amount of their life cycle with a growing company are living with that existential threat and probably thinking about it on a daily basis. I mentioned sort of in the past, I've sort of been quoted as talking about the cocaine and quaaludes sort of turmoil of being a CEO. Like there's hardly a day when there isn't something that gets you feeling euphoric about how right your path is and how you've got it, you've solved it. You and I before the call we talked about one such exciting development for liquid space that touch wood is going to happen. And then there's also, as the CEO, you're also looking for every vulnerability, for every weakness. You're deeply aware of the strengths and the weaknesses of your team, and so those holy shit moments of, oh my god, this quaalude moment, like, oh my god, like that might kill us, or oh, that deal got delayed, or that that hire didn't happen. So like that's just par. That's par for the
Right,
course.
right.
Throw COVID on top of it, and yeah, like there are new externalities that we've had to grapple with. I mean, the biggest of which is for a lot of companies, like the economy just pretty much shut down or constrained itself. Certainly in the real estate world, it's been suspended animation for 9 months. But it's not. It's not. Maybe CEOs were better prepared for this. It's not an entirely different world. It's just an extreme version of the kind of cocaine and quaaludes. I'm not a drug user, so forgive the references. I'm not trying to glorify drug use, but I think that that peaks and valley kind of reality, that existential threat, we're familiar with that. We're hardened. We're battle hardened for that type of experience.
Hmm. What's been the biggest challenge then? Because obviously, if you're saying you're used to this roller coaster, is it? I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it open rather than trying to give direction.
Um, I mean, the biggest challenge for us, or the biggest task that we seized on, was forcing even greater to focus to our business.
Yeah. Hmm.
So most companies, many companies, I won't say most, many companies saw somewhere in this 9 month path that we've been on the need to get a bit conservative on expenses because top line revenues were down, and that forces the forces to become really clear on what matters, right? And so for us, that drove a substantial further focusing on a certain element of our business that we are seeing yield enormously, and we think is going to be a huge pull for us, into the months and years ahead. But focus means you're saying no to certain things, right? Pet projects or things you were really excited about that you want to work on. There have been some tough choices in terms of things to either fully turn off or at least delay for some amount of time. That's been the hardest thing. Focus is really hard.
Yeah.
I think people in narrowly defined is really hard. So.
Yeah. So what do you do that? Sorry, I know that I keep prying here. I keep going deeper. Apologies, but well, I'm not really gonna apologize. But it's one of those things. So I mean, how do you then decide this is what we're going to focus on because you got all these various options? Is there a process you go through?
Well, one of the processes, and you could apply this to real estate planning too, but one of them was sort of a zero baseline approach. Like, let's just start at zero. Like, let's just strip everything back, and what are we going to put back into the boat? So, who's the customer that we're going to serve? What's the value proposition that we're going to fulfill? Like, who's the strongest customer? What's the greatest pain? Like, let's recalibrate on for us, here's some internal language. We recalibrate on what's the white hot center of the flexible office market now. And we concluded through our reflections and our analysis and our customer work that the white hot center of the flexible office world, the co-working world, had shifted. In March, April, it shifted. It got smaller temporarily, and it shifted. It shifted away from co-working spaces to be used by the fringe of companies, in times when they didn't yet want to sign a long-term lease, or by small startups. It shifted to becoming the center point that many more and much larger companies were going to use as a more substantial portion of their portfolio. It also shifted to this dimension of on-demand. It became quickly very clear that employees and small groups tapping into space for a day or two as part of a workplace strategy was going to become a significantly larger part of that economy. So we got to that by starting at zero. The same way I think a lot of real estate leaders are starting at zero with regards to workplace. Take Dropbox. Their announcement of a couple of weeks ago, where they said we're going to be a virtual first company. Drew Houston came out and declared that. And what that means is we're going to plan that all individual work will be done at home. And then our remaining office locations and any new ones that we deploy, which we'll call studios, will be places for collaborative events to happen. Whether that's an all hands meeting or 3 people getting together to do an engineering scrum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's zero baseline thinking. Like, I'm going to start at home where everyone has been working, and I'm going to add back in what I need for just those things that I needed. So for us, zero baseline, we applied to everything that we're doing. I think it's a useful construct for workplace transformation thinking.
Yeah. No, I agree. I really like that approach. And for organizations, they could ask themselves, would I be in this office today if we were starting again, right? And you basically do that zero baseline. It is a really good approach and method of thinking. Mark, look, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's a very diverse conversation today. Great insights. Great to chat with you and connect with you as always. Thank you, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, ditto, buddy. Likewise.
Yep. Thank you, man. So, folks, if this is something you like and you want to hear this more often, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the like button, share it. Do visit opensourceworkplace.com and check out liquidspace.com. There you go. All right, Mark. Cheers, mate. Thank you for your time. Cheers.